Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. Kicking off the first full week of April with a jam-packed hour plus of sports talk, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with Joe's JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Thursday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And before I get to anything and everything that's happening in the toy department of life, I'd be remiss if I did not start this podcast off, which I'm sure a lot of other podcasts, a lot of other talking head shows, a lot of other sports talk radio programs outside of the DC area would not begin here. And it would be just, I would think, a sports malpractice that a lot of these shows, and I'm not going to do it, but I have to, only because when you have a record that for, how long has it been? Since 1999, when Wayne Gretzky last laced up his skates as a member of the New York Rangers, and I don't believe he scored a goal in his final game. But considering that this record is now 31 years old, and it wasn't until yesterday afternoon out on Long Island, where the Washington Capitals played the New York Islanders in what bounds to be I don't want to say meaningless game, only because the Islanders are still in the mix for the playoffs. And I'll touch on that in a little while. But when you have a record that has been held for 31 years by a player, and I don't care what sport you love, I don't care what sport you follow, Wayne Gretzky is arguably the third biggest athlete in the history of sports. That's right. And you could argue that. Now, as far as pro sports, team sports, I get it. You have the Jack Nicklaus's, the Muhammad Ali's, you want to throw in Jim Thorpe and Jesse Owens if you want to go way back. But when it comes to professional sports, there are three athletes that I think are better than Wayne Gretzky. And he doesn't take a backseat to anybody when you really think about it. Because when you look at what the great one has done throughout the course of his career, and it's not about him at this present moment, but I will say that when you have somebody that's going to surpass him, and when it comes to goal scoring in the National Hockey League, as what we saw there yesterday with Alex Ovechkin, and think about it, Friday night, he actually tied Wayne Gretzky's record with 2 goals against the Blackhawks. And in the post-game interview, he even said that $8.95 cannot come via the empty net, which would cheapen, and I understand it counts in the record books, and Lord knows I believe he has the most empty net goals in the history of the sport. But he did not want to get the one that was going to break Wayne Gretzky by way of an empty netter. And what you saw there yesterday, down 2-0, where he, on a typical Ovi spot, right there near the face-off circle on the left side of the ice, where he took a pass from Tom Wilson, cross ice, one-timed it to the back of the net. Ilya Sorokin, who he had not scored upon, which I was actually surprised, considering that the Capitals and Islanders play 4 times a year. And not to say that Sorokin plays a net every time he faced the Capitals, but you would have thought throughout the last few years, with Sorokin being the netminder for the Islanders, that Ovechkin would have scored a goal on him. And as it was, that was his first time that he did so. And with that came the celebration. And a celebration that was well-deserved. For the game to be paused 25 minutes, to have his family come out, the owner of the Capitals, Ted Leonsis, of course, the great one was there with his wife, Janet, and to have everybody in the building, Islander fans, of course, and the Capital fans who came up the Northeast Corridor to watch this game and to see history. And that's why I had to start off this podcast talking about this, because we will not see this record as long as I'm alive, and I just turned 56. This record is not going to get broken. Even when you got a guy like Connor McDavid, who is going up the ranks as far as point totals and even goal scoring, but even then, he's still more than halfway to get to $8.95, and of course, this is counting. And we'll get to Ovechkin and what's going to happen next when it comes to his career in a moment. But for guys that are playing right now, they are light years away from $8.95. There isn't anyone close to Alex Ovechkin when it comes to even getting near that record. So this is going to be one that's going to stand the test of time until God knows when. And that's why it was important. And I wonder how many other shows have started with Ovechkin today, because granted, he's not an American-born player. Granted, he's not even a Canadian-born player. He is from Russia, and I understand there's going to be a faction of people that are going to celebrate it for their own personal reasons, which is stupid because this has to do with sports. It does not have to do with the person. But with that being said, knowing that he is now alone, he got to the top of Mount Gretzky and he planted his flag, and now it's Mount Ovechkin when it comes to goal scoring in the history of this league. And there are just a plethora of guys that we could talk about. Snipers, playmakers, just goal scorers. And yes, he's the guy that now leads the brigade. And a record that nobody ever even imagined being broken. And he did it there yesterday at the UBS Arena, even though it was in a 4-1 loss. Meaningless to them because they're going to get the 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. But now Ovechkin stands alone. And the ceremony was great. And give it up to Wayne Gretzky, class personified, even thanking the Islanders, their organization, talking about the games that I played at the Nassau Coliseum, that I won very few of those out there. He did lose a cup in 83, although bounced back and won a cup in 84, and only played 2 games in that building before getting the next 3 in Edmonton. But I digress. But he had nothing but great things to say about the Islanders, about the organization, talking to Brian Trottier before the game and former Islanders of yesteryear. And, of course, passing it off to Alex Ovechkin, where he turned to Ted Leonsis and he said, well, when I broke Gordie Howe's record, I got a Rolls Royce, so you got your work cut out for him as when it comes to the owner of the Capitals having to give Alexander Ovechkin a nice gift, parting gift, maybe not parting, but a nice gift for an achievement that he did it in 1 uniform, I might add, which is also another record that's not going to be broken, because can you imagine somebody who's going to get that in 1 uniform? I'm sure there's going to be a player or two along the way, whether it be Nathan McKinnon down the road or let's say even Connor McDavid, but still, long way to get to where Ovechkin is. And it was just typical Ovechkin with that goal, the belly flop on the ice, didn't even know what to do or how to celebrate. He just pretty much did a sliding headfirst bouncing of the belly there on the ice, and then the teammates came on to converge and the celebration began, and it was just a great sight to behold. And now for Ovechkin, where does he go from here? Now the team obviously has bigger fish to fry when it comes to the playoffs, having a 1 seed. There's going to be a lot of pressure on them. I'm going to talk about that in a couple of weeks when we preview the Stanley Cup playoffs. But for right now, I'm sure the focus is on their team being as healthy as they possibly can, getting ready for a long couple of months, a Stanley Cup, which for him, and I talked about this even 2 podcasts ago, whether or not that he breaks the record before the end of the regular season, which he did, and if he happens to bring his team all the way to a Stanley Cup and win the Stanley Cup final, that is the best way for him to go out. Now, who am I to tell him to retire on that note? But really, he got the record. Maybe he wants to shoot for 900, and he still has a few games left. Who knows? He may even get 900 before Game 82 is complete, which would be stunning. And I would actually like to see that. But I'm sure they're going to give Ovi a lot of rest here. He's going to play in these games. But the last thing they need is for him to get injured. And even though he's indestructible, despite the fact that he did break his leg early this year and missed 16 games, but he still got the record, 900. Does he have 1,000? Have his sights set on that? Who knows? But right now, we can only think about this present moment. And obviously, he's going to do whatever it takes to continue to be productive and effective here over these last 5, 6, 7 games. And then it's going to be all about April, May, and possibly June. And whether or not the Capitals are going to get there, that's a whole other story. But I would think for Ovechkin, now that he has the record, does he want to go for 900? Whether it be this year or next? I don't know. And why not if he's still healthy? And I believe he has 1 more year left on his deal. So I could see him maybe playing out next year to try to extend his record to as far down the road as he possibly can. Fantastic. Does he want to get to 1,000? I'm sure he would play on a veteran minimums salary, considering he's made a ton of money throughout the course of his career just to get to 1,000. But who knows? We don't know what Ovechkin's going to do past this year, considering he has this record. And if he does win a Stanley Cup, I would think he would probably just go out on that note. He's 39 years of age. He's going to turn 40. I mean, what else can he prove? What else is he going to do? But now, to me, is even a bigger question. And one that I'm not really into the hot takes and the regurgitated narratives. You know, when it comes to my podcast, I'm not going the route of the lazy sports talk 101 stuff. But this is a legitimate question. And I think I know what the answer is. And I'm sure a lot of hockey fans and good sports fans know what the answer is as well. But because when you look at Mount Rushmore and you look at the four faces that belong in the NHL, and I'm talking about players, I'm not talking about goaltenders. All right, so I'm just talking about your forwards and defensemen. If you want to put a Mount Rushmore for goalies, you could certainly do that, which I'm sure would be, off the top of my head, you're probably looking at Terry Sawchuk, maybe Jacques Plante, Patrick Roy, Martin Brodeur. And I'm sure you can maybe switch one of those two guys out. Where's Ken Dryden? Bernie Perrant? I know Perrant didn't really have the length, but you have to throw Dryden up there. But Jacques Plante and Terry Sawchuk, those are the two guys dating back to the 50s. But for the regular player, Gordie Howe's Mr. Hockey. There's no way you're going to take him off. And he played until he was 50. Wayne Gretzky, do I even need to say more? Bobby Orr, the defenseman that revolutionized the position as the offensive defenseman back 60s into the 70s. And then you have the fourth guy. And I think that fourth guy, you would have to put Alex Ovechkin there. Not only because he was the greatest goal scorer in the history of the sport, but also because he defines this generation. And it's weird because you have another guy who is his contemporary and a one Sidney Crosby, who is also recently broken a record shared by Wayne Gretzky. And Gretzky holds, I believe, now 49 records in the NHL. It was 51, I believe, when he retired. And maybe there was another record or two broken along the way, maybe with power play goals and things of that nature. But I would think Ovechkin could be that fourth face because now, since Gretzky, and I understand you've had Crosby there, but you haven't had a guy that would carry the mantle, at least for this generation, that belongs on that Mount Rushmore. And I think you have to put Ovechkin there. Not only because at 39 years of age and him being productive, scoring 40 goals yet again, and has 9 50-goal seasons, 1 60-goal season, and all the records that he has demolished along the way. And I get it that Crosby's more of a playmaker and a guy that's averaged a point per game for 20 years straight. And certainly you could argue whether or not his face belongs up there, or Mario Lemieux, or Marc Messier, or you want to throw in Brett Hull. Now, Brett Hull's a big-time goal scorer, but Alexander Ovechkin's got that covered. So therefore, maybe Hull gets pushed to the side. And you have a bunch of other guys that are deserving to be up there. But I would have to think, and I'm not doing this as a prisoner of the moment, I'm not doing this as a, oh yeah, just put him up there. But you have to really think about how this guy and what he was able to do here over the course of not only his whole career, but to get to that point to where he is now number one all time. You got to give him his just due. And yes, you could argue whether Crosby belongs there, or who knows, maybe when it's all said and done, Connor McDavid will be up there. You can't take out Gretzky, Howe, or Orr. Those three are entrenched. That fourth one, you could certainly debate. And yes, we could talk about just fresh off of him getting this record. Oh, well, you're just giving it to him because he got the record. Well, the guy's been indestructible. The guy has been just a brute force. He's been a power forward and a guy that has just barreled his way to this record and has scored just unbelievable goals. And thankfully, he did get that Stanley Cup in 2018 because maybe he wouldn't even be up there if he didn't get that cup, where he had so many foibles in the postseason, losing excruciating series, whether he was up 3-1 in the series to Montreal in 2010 before losing that series, or losing to Sidney Crosby in previous Stanley Cup playoff series, and having just one seed, just not being able to get to a conference final or even to a Stanley Cup final, just brutal losses that are littered up until he won that cup in 2018 against the Vegas Golden Knights. And now that he got that cup, and of course him getting this record, why not? He belongs there. And that's why I had to start off this podcast. So congratulations to Alexander Ovechkin on reaching that plateau. And hopefully he does get to 900, and hopefully he gets another cup this year. I think it would even cement him if he got that cup this year, that he would belong up on hockey's Mount Rushmore. So I had to start off with that. It would have been, like I said, sports malpractice and even criminal not to begin there. What am I going to do? Talk about the Final Four, which I'll get to next. And the Final Four was fantastic. But to me, when you have a record that I understand in the U.S. is not going to be as revered as the home run record, or maybe now in this recent vintage, considering the records that were broken by quarterbacks, whether it comes to touchdowns or yardage. But even then, nobody can tell you how many yards Tom Brady has thrown for him to be number one all time, or how many touchdowns he's thrown, or completions, or things of that nature. So hockey, I understand, doesn't have that allure that baseball did in the past prior to steroids, especially with home runs. But this is a record held by the player before him, who is an immortal figure in his sport and even throughout sports. When you think of number 99, there's only one. And now with Ovechkin surpassing him, he had to get his props. He had to get top billing here on this podcast. And I only hope with other shows and podcasts that are out there, whether TV, radio, digital, obviously in this universe that I'm speaking with and speaking to, I would only hope that he gets that same respect, and widely deserved, as I close it out here when it comes to the grade 8, Alexander Ovechkin. All right, now as far as the rest of the NHL, and then I'll get to the basketball, but just a couple of things here, as we're now 10 days away from the conclusion of the regular season. Now, Leon Draisaitl had to leave the game the other day against San Jose with an undisclosed injury. I know earlier, I believe he suffered an upper body injury. Didn't know the details of that. It was rumored that it was possibly a concussion. But for Draisaitl, who is the goal-scoring leader this year in the NHL, of course, the Oilers trying to fight it out there with the Kings to see if they could get home ice in that first round against LA. But other than that, not a lot to really chew on there with off-the-ice stuff, with news. We know that and I'll start there with the Western Conference with Edmonton. They're 4 points behind the Kings right now. And they both had played 76 games, so with 6 games left. And with the Oilers trying to see if they can get the home ice, I think, would that be huge for them? Not necessarily, because they did beat the Kings last year, although Edmonton did have the home ice in the first round in that series. So just something to keep in mind. The Kings are playing well. They've won 4 in a row. They are 5 points behind the Vegas Golden Knights for the top spot there in the Pacific. So something to keep in mind. I don't know if Vegas and LA, the Kings, are going to play here down the stretch. Maybe come Thursday with the final week of the season, I'll go through the schedules to see where those teams lie, if they could maybe leapfrog or even get closer if they do play one another. So we'll keep that in mind as we move on toward the middle part of the week. You have Winnipeg, who are now just 3 points ahead of the Dallas Stars for number 1 overall out west. So the Stars, who have played well, and although they lost 2 in a row, but they had a big winning streak prior to that. And then you have Colorado, who's going to be the 3 seed and will play at Dallas unless the Stars overtake the Jets for the top spot out west. And even with that top spot, they'll be fighting for the President's Trophy. As I've said a million times, I don't think any team wants to get that, because that's almost a death knell for them to get to and win a Stanley Cup final. But with the Capitals at 107, the Winnipeg Jets at 108, and Dallas at 105, you have a 3-team race to get to that top spot. So we'll see how that shakes down. And then, of course, you have Toronto with a 4-point lead over the Lightning, where the Lightning have a 2-point lead over the Panthers, and they've lost 5 in a row, and they've really hit an abutment here as they're just trying to get to the finish line. They're going to make it to the postseason, and they'll be fine, the Panthers that is, but certainly picking a bad time to play as the playoffs are looming here over the course of the next 2 weeks from yesterday is when the Stanley Cup playoffs will begin. And then you have Carolina entrenched in the 2, 96 points. Devils at 89. And then the wild card, you have in the East, the Senators, who now have a little bit of separation, 5 points ahead of the Montreal Canadiens. And it looks like the wild card, which looked like it was going to be a logjam there for quite some time, heading into this part of the week, or the latter part of the week, dating back to Thursday, with the Canadiens winning 5 in a row and now put themselves with a 6-game or 6-point advantage over the Rangers and Red Wings, and 7 points over the Islanders. It looks like the East could be a wrap by the time we get to, maybe if not Thursday, but maybe a week from today, where the wild card race, which looked like, think about this, 2 weeks ago you had 6 teams fighting it out for one spot, and now with the Canadiens winning 5 in a row and with Ottawa pushing themselves ahead for the number 1 seed in the wild card race, now it looks like it's a formality that you're going to have Ottawa and Montreal penciled into the Stanley Cup playoffs where everybody else are going to be flailing and trying to do their best. Granted that they do have a game in hand on the Canadiens, the teams that are beneath them, but still, it looks like the Canadiens are in good shape, barring just them going the other way in a tailspin and for the other teams to catch up. And then out west, the Blues, they've won 12 in a row. They are as hot as a pistol, 2 points ahead of the Wild, which is big because that means the Blues will face the Vegas Golden Knights as the season ended today, as opposed to the Winnipeg Jets, who, as we all know, they've been front runners all year. But with the Wild 2 points behind the Blues, they're certainly within striking distance to get that 1 seed in the West. And then you have, similar to the East, Calgary 5 points behind the Minnesota Wild, and then you have Vancouver 8 points behind them. So who knows? Do I have my math correct? Yeah, 6 and 8 points. So does Calgary have a run in them here? And does the Vancouver Canucks have the same? I don't know. Right now, it is looking like the only race that you're going to have in the NHL is the Atlantic with the Toronto Maple Leafs, Tampa Bay Lightning, and Florida Panthers. And even there's a little bit of separation between those teams right now. So the NHL looking like pretty much a snooze fest where we thought it was going to be intriguing down the stretch. More so for the wild cards than for the divisions. But right now, it is looking rather glum, if you ask me, with these playoff races there in the NHL. And as far as the schedule here, at least for the next few days, tonight you have Tampa at New York to play the Rangers, St. Louis at Winnipeg, good game there, Edmonton at Anaheim, Seattle at LA, and that's what you have there tonight. Tomorrow, Detroit at Montreal, Toronto at Florida, huge game there for the Panthers if they want to even inch closer to a possible division title. Boston at New Jersey. That's meaningless because Boston's out of it and the Devils there entrenched. Islanders are at Nashville. Vancouver at Dallas. It's huge because Vancouver, for whatever hopes that they have left. Vegas at Colorado. Big game there. And that's an ESPN doubleheader tomorrow. 7 and 9:30. Toronto at Florida, followed by Vegas at Colorado. And then you have a TNT doubleheader on Wednesday, which I don't know in what way, shape, or form. Philadelphia Flyers at the Rangers, where Toronto at Tampa is the 7 o'clock game, ESPN Plus. I guess contractually they have that game. That should be the highlight game to start because Tampa, as I just talked about, trying to get to the top spot in the Atlantic, and with Toronto currently residing there, that is a huge game in the Eastern Conference. And then the TNT doubleheader, St. Louis at Edmonton, good game there. And then that's all you pretty much have as far as your schedule heading into Thursday. So the NHL, Toronto-Tampa, that is the game here over the next few days. And Toronto playing in Florida on top of that tomorrow night. So you're looking at the Atlantic here for the next 2 days. Toronto could pretty much put it to rest with a sweep in the Sunshine State if they do come out victorious in both of those contests there tomorrow and on Wednesday. So we'll keep an eye on that as we head towards Thursday's podcast. All right, now let me take off the skates and get into basketball mode as I lace up the high tops, and I'll start off with the college basketball. Well, we did get a Final Four that was worth sinking our teeth into because, as we talked about there, pretty much after the opening weekend of the tournament and then after the Sweet 16, it has been a dull tournament. And we were hoping with all the 1 seeds making it to San Antonio for the Final Four that we were only hoping that we would get some thrilling games. And we did get one thrilling game. The other one was very good too. But overall, I would say we got an A-. And I know that may be a hard marker because you say, JAYREELZ, well, the Auburn game against Florida, that was very good there. Maybe not to the very end, but surely that it was contested up until, I would say, maybe the last minute and a half or so. All right, fine, no problem. And it was. Very good game. A lot of back and forth, up and down, and I'll start there. The heroics of Walter Clayton Jr., who's certainly making his name here in this tournament. Now, he has one more game to win in order to stamp his name forever when it comes to this tournament in particular. And, of course, with the Gators, if they do win this championship game tonight, and, of course, I'll preview it right after we get through the Final Four games. But this was a very good game. I know Janai Broom, who had that elbow issue, who played well in the first half and then faded there in the second half. Maybe you want to give it up to Florida a little bit defensively. Not so much. I think that it was a thing where Florida was able to prevail there late, and despite the fact that they had an 8-point lead at the half, but they were able to slow down Broom. They were able to slow down their offense there a little bit. Weren't able to get a lot there on track there in the second half. And again, Walter Clayton Jr. with 34 points. What more can you say about him and what he's done to deliver his team to the point where they're just one win away from winning a national championship, the first one since the back-to-back teams of 06-07. Then you have Thomas Houck, who, although did not have a good end of his game, but certainly contributed and played well. And with Clayton leading the way and the cast of characters beneath them that certainly contributed and played well here in that second half in order for the Gators to get to this point where now they're just 40 minutes away from hoisting a trophy over their heads and cutting down the nets. This game really boiled down to those final couple of minutes where, although the Gators had a lead and were in, I don't want to say cruise control, but certainly had the game in hand. But at 71-68, where Florida was looking to put the final dagger, that running bank shot off the glass was the biggest shot of the game with a minute 33 to go, and Auburn needed to get a stop there in order to get to the other side of the floor to hopefully either tie the game into 3 or at least cut it to 1. But when Clayton at 71-68, and he just got the prior basket to that and had a stretch where he scored earlier in the half where he had a bunch of points. I believe he had a 7-point stretch where Florida had taken the lead at that point. But for Clayton, if Auburn was able to stop him there at that minute 33 mark where he had that acrobatic and one off the glass, got the free throw, 74-68, and then it was punctuated there just moments after by Thomas Houck, who had the N1, 37 seconds left, although he missed a free throw. But that iced the game. It was a 6-point game, turned into an 8-point game, and even though Auburn 79-73 was the final, but that was it. Auburn ran out of gas. They were unable to make stops there. They couldn't do a number on Walter Clayton Jr., who's done a number on plenty of other teams throughout the course, not only of this tournament throughout this year where they've only lost one game, and that was to Georgia since February 1st. So the Gators, what more can I say about them? And for Auburn, that's just a tough defeat. You got to tip your hat to Florida. I get it. Auburn came into this tournament as the number 1 seed overall and did lose to Florida earlier this year in their building, 90-81, and here it was, a chance for redemption, especially where the money was on the table, where they could erase that regular season, and not that anybody thought about it or cared once the ball was up in the air, but if they were victorious, they could and would have had the last laugh, but that was not the case as Florida advances. And now to get to the nightcap, and I know if you're John Shire, the coach, Cooper Flagg, Tyrese Proctor in particular, and I'll get to him in a moment, they have not slept a wink. I'm sure they've tossed and turned since Saturday night. And granted, it's been 36, 38 hours since that defeat there late Saturday night against the Houston Cougars. But that is one, if you're a Duke fan and the players on that team and the alumni, and I'm sure Grant Hill, he was probably sick to his stomach watching it. And even at one point on the inbounds pass, which I'll get to, he even said, "Are you serious?" For Duke to lose that game, and to me, they lost it more than Houston won it. I'm sorry, this is not a diss to the Houston Cougars, to Kelvin Sampson, etc. But when you're up by 9 with 2:15 to go, 64-55, and you only score one basket over the final 10 and a half minutes of the game, they shrunk in a big spot. And I understand, give it up to Houston. They played defense. They did what they had to do, especially when Cooper Flagg was looking to get that bucket there late where it was defended by Jawan Roberts, and it was certainly contested, but he didn't make the shot. And I'll get to throwing bouquets at Houston's feet in a moment, but when you have a lead, one more time, 9 points with 2:15 to go, you got to deliver. You got to bring that game home. I don't care who you are. I don't care what team, etc. And they had a double-digit lead. I get it, double-digit leads slip in any sport, especially when it comes to pro basketball and even college, because with the three-point ball, you get back in the game on a quick run. I understand that. But this isn't a Houston team that was Phi-Slamma-Jamma. There was no Michael Young, Akeem Olajuwon, or Clyde Drexler on the other side of that floor. And that's not to knock Emmanuel Sharp And it's not to knock LJ Cryer, and it's not to knock Joseph Tugler. No, not in the least. But when you had that big of a lead and you're unable to get points there to secure this game, that is just a terrible job. And again, Cooper Flagg, I know he's going to go to the NBA. He's probably going to be the number one pick. But that loss is going to sit with him. And that's where, like they talked about at the end of the broadcast, Iron Eagle, Bill Raftery, and Grant Hill, they said this is where legends are made. And when we break it down here, where Houston came back, and at 67-61, think about this, 67-61 with 45 seconds left. All they needed to do was make a stop. Emmanuel Sharp gets a three. All right, fine. No problem. What happened on that inbounds pass at 67-64? Just sloppy play. The ball gets kicked out to a three. I believe it was Sharp that took the three. Missed it. He gets the putback there. I believe it was by Tugler. Thought there was a foul there. And there was not a foul. In fact, at 67-66, where Duke had the ball, this is where Tyrese Proctor comes into the mix. Proctor gets fouled. A 1-and-1. I believe there was how much time left on the clock? 20-something seconds, I believe, at this point, because this was after, it was 30 seconds. It was about 30-something seconds, 37 seconds when the putback was in after the errant, terrible inbounds pass. And then Duke had the ball. Proctor got fouled. I believe with 22 seconds left. And then Proctor on the line, all he needed to do was make the first one. He misses it. Houston gets the rebound, and then Cooper Flagg gets fouled, which was a terrible call. They thought it was an over the back. Upon replay, as you saw it, and even live, I said, wait a minute, who got the foul? And then when you see Flagg get whistled there at that point, you said to yourself, wow, that is a weak call. And even the broadcast said, oh, you got to play on there. So terrible call there. So now Juwan Roberts gets to the free throw line at 67-66 Duke. And what does he do? He sinks both free throws. So now you have a situation where 68-67, this was where Roberts, after making those free throws, Flagg gets the ball, and you knew it was going to go to him. The contest there by Roberts, heavily defended, great way. If Flagg would have made that shot, he would have been heroic, and if they would have won the game, that not would have been Christian Laettner against Kentucky many moons ago, but certainly would have been put in that discussion to where he made a tough shot, closing seconds of a game, and if Duke would have prevailed, that would have been remembered forever. But he missed it. Then Houston gets the ball. They make their final two free throws. Desperation heave. Proctor, who tried to be the hero to at least tie the game, just throws a Hail Mary up. It goes over the backboard. Duke loses. And Houston advances to the championship game. Now I'll throw my bouquets at the Cougars. What more can you say? This is a team that I said on Thursday, if Duke gets to 65, or if you keep them at 65 and below, they have a good shot to win the game. As it was, they were at 67. But who would have thought at 54, I believe it was, 59-45 with about 10 and a half minutes to go. I believe Cooper Flagg made a three at that point. They were up 14. And then, as I mentioned, the final 10 and a half minutes, that Cooper Flagg three from the corner at 62-54. 62-56 to make it a 9-point game. You thought the game was over. Because at 3 minutes and 2 seconds to go, and mind you, it took almost a minute off the clock, or 45 seconds roughly, to where Houston scored to make it 64-58. And then with some free throws that were made where they extended the lead, it was 67-61. And then Houston, whether it was LJ Cryer, who had a big game, what did he score? 27 points in the game. And Emmanuel Sharp, who continued his great shooting like he did against Tennessee and had some clutch threes there, even though he missed that 1-3 with the putback, but still got them back in the game. Tugler, as you talked about, with the putback. Roberts with the clutch free throws. Obviously, it was a team effort, and they were able to come from behind. And this is a Houston Cougar team who's known for their defense, who's known to lock down. As I like to say, they like to play from playing a phone booth. And they did what it took down the stretch. Now, Duke missed a lot of shots. And when you only score one basket in 10 and a half minutes, it's not all on the defense. Yes, when it mattered and when it counted, they certainly made their stops. Give them credit. But, and now I'm going back to the Duke side of things, but Houston did what they had to do and pulled this game out of the fire. So all the kudos goes to the black, as you saw that night, but the red and white. So now they're just one step away from winning a national title that has eluded them dating back to the days of Olajuwon and Drexler. And just a couple of years ago when they lost to Baylor in the Final Four. So now here it is, your national championship game, Duke, Houston. I tell you, CBS, now they're going to have a good game. And this is by no means, one more time, any disrespect toward the Cougars. But everybody was hoping for Florida Duke in the final. And if Duke would have prevailed, and especially if Cooper Flag would have made that shot at 68-67 and would have won that game, this would have been a tremendous buildup. Because with Flag, and obviously with the big future that is in store for him, and knowing that he's going to be gone from the college ranks and go to the pros, this was one that everybody was looking forward to. And now you have Houston there. So I don't know how much of the regular, just average sports fan is going to gravitate to this game. Now, if Duke was there, everybody knows Duke. Everybody knows the pedigree of that university. So, of course, the average Joe is going to say, well, hey, there's a championship game on tonight. Yeah, no, Florida's played good throughout this tournament. And, oh, Duke's there, I'm going to watch. Houston doesn't have that sex appeal. Florida, because of what they've done here, and they have a player that has just been unconscious, obviously he's going to bring eyeballs to the sets. But Houston, now you can look at it from this angle, the defense and what they're going to provide to do whatever it takes to stop Clayton. Now, as I preview the game, just a segue there, that's going to be the number one factor. Is Clayton going to go off to have that epic performance and to cement his name in tournament history as a guy who has now, deep in the tournament, back-to-back 30-point games, which hasn't been done since Larry Bird. Can he pull off another 30-point or even just a 27, 28-point effort to where the Gators go on and win a national championship? And to me, that's what it boils down to. Now, yes, we could talk about the other factors there. Will Thomas Houck have a big game? Will the LJ Cryer have anything close to what he had there against Duke come tonight against the Gators? Also, you would think, Juwan Roberts, is he going to be the guy that's going to key in defensively on Clayton Jr. tonight, knowing that he could go off and certainly turn the game on a dime? So you do have some interesting storylines going into the game tonight. But is it going to be attractive? Is it going to be one that is going to be riveting, compelling, back and forth, this and that? Now, if Houston could pull off a carbon copy of what they did Saturday night, then great. But will they technically, A, run out of gas, and Florida will just go ahead and coast? I don't want to say coast, that's too strong. But will they pull away late, similar to what they did here against Auburn? Or is it going to be tooth and nail, scratch and claw, a 15-round knockdown, drag down heavyweight fight to where it's going to come down to the final couple of possessions? I would hope that it's going to come down to the latter, but something tells me it's going to be the former. I would not be surprised if Houston wins. And quite frankly, I think they may win tonight. I'm going to say Florida because I picked them to win the whole thing just based on my brackets dating back a few weeks ago. But I think Houston is certainly a live dog. They're a 1 seed and certainly do not even need to take a back seat to Florida. And this is even before they beat Duke because they are a 1 seed. This is not a Cinderella team we're talking about here. And knowing that they beat Duke and in the fashion that they beat them, they are certainly a team that can win this whole thing tonight. That's why I wouldn't be surprised. And you know what? There may be a part of me, and I'm not going to jump on the bandwagon now only because I picked Florida like I mentioned, but if it wasn't for that, I would say Houston will probably win tonight. And Clayton will, maybe the clock will strike 12, or maybe he'll do a lot. He'll put up a lot of shots, so he may have a ton of points, but he may do it with 20-some odd shots. So I think when it's all said and done, Florida will probably win a game. Now, they're going to have to get high 70s because I don't know if Houston, as they just got 70 there on Saturday night, I don't know if you're going to get Houston similar to Duke, if you're going to get them mid-high 70s in the 80s. I don't think Houston, they don't want to play a game like that. Now, they showed that they could, but they held Duke to 67. And mind you, are the Gators going to make one basket in the final 10.5 minutes of a game in order for Houston to win? I can't see that happening. That's why I feel Florida is going to win, but I would not be surprised any way, shape, or form. And there is a part of me I think Houston will win. But I'm going to say Florida because of the carpet ride and them having the toughness and mettle to win these type of games. And even though Houston did do so on Saturday night, but there's a little bit more of a track record with Florida here, and I think they'll do just enough to win tonight. And it'll be a similar score to what they did in beating Auburn. I could see this being a 79-75 type of game. Mid to high 70s, maybe it'll cross 80. Maybe it'll be 82-76 when it's all said and done. And even though Thursday's podcast will be a distant memory, check the YouTube channel on my shorts at JAYREELZ for whether it be up to the minute. If it's a classic, I'll put up a post there tonight. If it's not, you'll hear my post and my assessment of the game tomorrow as we put to bed the college basketball season tonight, sometime I would say around midnight as the game will start at 8:50. All right, now let me get to the NBA as just like with the hockey, and I hate to say it, although you do have the one intriguing storyline here, and I will say that, but the Western Conference, you have a scenario. Your top two seeds are set. I think the Rockets are going to be fine. They're going to end up winning, or I should say winning. They're going to end up getting the 2 seed overall in the Western Conference. They do have a 2-game lead over the Lakers as of this present moment. Actually, it's 3 in a loss and 3.5. Yes, because the Lakers, although they obliterated the Oklahoma City Thunder, but the Thunder, listen, psychologically, I don't think that's going to bother them. I know that's going to put more gas in the Laker tank. Not that they need it, but I didn't follow that game closely. But when you win 125-99 or whatever the score was, that is as convincing as it comes. Now, I don't know if it was maybe a close game midway through the fourth quarter and then the Lakers just turned on the Jets and took off from there. I don't know. Again, I didn't follow it. But here's what you got in the Western Conference here as we're now 6 days away. Sunday is the regular season finale throughout the association. And what you have here from the 4 seed through the 8 seed is literally a traffic jam on an LA freeway. Doesn't have to be at 5 o'clock or rush hour. It could be any hour. Get ready for this. Denver is currently 47-32 and has the 4th seed in the Western Conference. The LA Clippers, 5th seed, 46-32, half game behind the Nuggets. Warriors, 6th seed, 46-32, half game behind the Nuggets. 7th seed, Minnesota Timberwolves, 46-32, half game behind the Nuggets. The Memphis Grizzlies, 46-32, half game behind the Nuggets. 5 teams, half game between 4 and 8. I mean, you cannot have a more suffocating, more of a logjam to see who's going to get 4, 5, 6 because you do not want to get 7 and 8. You'd rather have the couple of extra days off. And even if you have a playing scenario at 7, 8 and you win the one game, fine. You'll still get a couple of days before the playoffs begin, which will be a week from this coming Saturday. And if you're the loser of the 7, 8, that means you have an extra game you're going to play before heading into the playoffs. So you want to avoid it altogether like the plague. So here's what we have with those teams, because other than that, there's nothing to talk about. Nothing to talk about in the East. I know the Bucks have played well, and you may have Damian Lillard. His progress has been better, and a lot more than what the Bucks and what Doc Rivers, the coach, had to say about it. That doesn't mean his return is imminent. Who knows? But it seems like his progress is trending northward, which is good, first and foremost, for Lillard's health and maybe for the Bucks' health overall if they do get him back at some point, let's say in the first round of the playoffs or even sooner. So that we'll have to wait and see. But the schedule this week, and I'll just talk about the teams that in the West. Tonight, you have 2 games, nothing to write home about. Sacramento, Detroit, and Philly at Miami. Sacramento, as they're trying to get that 10 seed, but it's not about them right now. This is tomorrow. Memphis at Charlotte. Minnesota at Milwaukee. Golden State at Phoenix. Boy, are they cratering. San Antonio at LA, the Clippers. All right, so that's easy for the Clippers. Who knows with Phoenix? Golden State, you figure that'd be easy. All right, let's go to Wednesday. Wednesday, you have Denver at Sacramento, Houston at the Clippers, San Antonio at Golden State. Easy game there. And that would round out your schedule there. Thursday, Minnesota at Memphis. Enormous game. That obviously we'll talk about when we get to Thursday's podcast. New York is playing Detroit. That could be a first-round matchup. That's on Thursday. Talk more about that then. Friday, you have Memphis at Denver. Ooh, Memphis. If they're going to earn that being at least in the top 6, the body of the tournament, they're going to earn it because, like I mentioned, hosting Minnesota and then they go to Denver the next night on a back-to-back. Keep that in mind. Golden State at Portland, Clippers in Sacramento, and I believe that's it. Out of the 5, right? Yeah, that is it for those teams. Brooklyn at Minnesota on Friday. Almost overlooked that. Then Sunday I believe is a full slate. Saturday, and again, the teams that are factored in the West. Why'd you put up Sunday? Are there no games Saturday? No, they're right. There are no games Saturday. Wow, so you have, let me count it. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you have a full slate Friday and Sunday. No game Saturday. So nobody's going to have an advantage. And all the games, almost similar to Major League Baseball, they're going to be done by 7 p.m. Sunday night. You have half the schedule at 1 o'clock and the other half at 3:30. And here it goes as follows. Denver at Houston. Houston will have nothing to play for. Dallas at Memphis. Dallas will have something to play for, especially if they're trying to get the home court over Sacramento for that 9-10 matchup. Utah, Minnesota. Clippers at Golden State. Huge game. So there you go. Those are your 5 teams. Clippers at Golden State. Denver at Houston. Dallas at Memphis. Am I missing somebody? I'm not, right? Just want to make sure. One more time. Denver at Houston. Memphis. Golden State, LA. I know I'm missing one. Get back to me. Minnesota, who are they playing? Utah, Minnesota. That is your schedule for the NBA. And Memphis, tough road for them. They're going to make it into the postseason. I mean, it's already clinched, but it's a matter of getting at least to number 6. So knowing that they have Minnesota coming into their building and they have to go to Denver the night after, that is going to be a tough order. So I would think right off the bat, they have the toughest schedule out of all the teams this week. So fascinating. That's what you have there in the standings. Again, I'm not going to go to the East. Maybe Thursday I'll rehash and see where we're at, because I know you have Indiana, Milwaukee, and Detroit separated. And more so, let me see. No, Indiana has the 4 seed. They're set. It's a matter of Milwaukee and Detroit, whether or not they're going to play at Indiana or in New York. Right now, Detroit will go to New York to play the Knicks, but that could flip-flop here. And let me see. Does Detroit play in Milwaukee this week? I should have looked at that. Detroit, Milwaukee. All right, Minnesota plays Milwaukee tomorrow. Then you have... Well, hold on a second. Let me make sure I get this proper. All right, let's start from tomorrow because I don't want to get cut off here. Minnesota, Milwaukee. Who does Detroit have? Well, Detroit plays Sacramento tonight, as you know. Minnesota, Milwaukee tomorrow. Wednesday, no games between the two there. I know you have the New York and Detroit. Thursday, New Orleans, Milwaukee on Thursday night. That has to be a gimme for the Bucks. Friday, Milwaukee, Detroit, 7 o'clock. And there you go. And then on Sunday, you have, wow. You have high-stakes drama, and how I almost overlooked this. This would have been, talk about podcast malpractice. This would have been an awful job if I didn't take an overview of the schedule. Your final 2 games. Now, Detroit, tougher schedule. And I get it that Minnesota's going to Milwaukee tomorrow night. But with Sacramento, who's fighting for a playoff spot tonight, and then they have a couple days off before the Knicks play in Detroit. And the Knicks have everything wrapped up, although Jalen Brunson is back, 3 for 9 shooting. What do you have? I think 15 points in the game last night, but I'm sure he's going to try to get himself into game shape. So not going to be an easy game for the Pistons. And then Friday, Milwaukee, Detroit. And then Sunday, Detroit and Milwaukee. And I understand it's a 5-6 seed. Nobody's going to go crazy. Nobody's going to jump up and down. But if you're the Bucks, would you rather play Indiana in the first round, 4-5, no home court, of course, or would you rather play the Knicks in the first round? That's how I look at it. And at the same time, 4-5, the winner there plays Cleveland. If you're 3-6, the winner's going to play, in all likelihood, Boston. So pick your poison there. And not to say that they want to lose on purpose to, let's say, play the Celtics as opposed to playing Cleveland. Or who knows, maybe they want to play Cleveland to see how tested they are, and maybe they'll be a little tight. But interesting, fascinating to say the least when it comes to the NBA here in this final stretch. More so in the West. I get it. Milwaukee, Detroit, nobody's really going to go crazy other than the fans in those cities. But at least you have a little bit of drama in the association here in this final week. All right, now let me get to the baseball as I get in the batter's box, and then some NFL news and notes before I will talk about, wow, that's an interesting story there. All right, with Duran sharing a story of suicide attempt. Ooh. But the big story in baseball, last night, the Toronto Blue Jays put the money where their mouths were when they discussed negotiating a contract with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And even though Guerrero did not want to negotiate in season, did not want to become a distraction, but the team, the hierarchy, the brass said, we're not letting this guy get away, considering they went after Shohei Ohtani, considering they went after Juan Soto, and they said, we're not going to have our homegrown talent leave via free agency at the end of the year. So what did they do? They plunked down a 14-year, $500 million contract for the Toronto Blue Jays slugger, and congratulations to him and even the Blue Jays, because if he would have gone elsewhere, and we could talk about the teams, whether it be the Cubs, whether it be the Red Sox, whether it be any other big market team, that would have been a travesty for the Blue Jays, knowing that also Bo Bichette is going to be a free agent at the end of the year. And who knows, maybe they'll try to re-sign him, considering in 2026 they're going to have a couple of big contracts off the books in Kevin Gausman and George Springer. So for them to get Vladdy in the fold for the next 14 years until he's 40, I believe he's 26 years of age, congratulations. Now, is he worth that type of money? Obviously, he's a slugger, and in order for him to even come close to making that amount of money, we know the back end of that deal is going to be just atrocious, just like it will be for Soto, just like it will be for Lindor, for all the players that you can mention that got big-time contracts. Fernando Tatis Jr., go on down the line. Because by the time they get to 34, 35, 36 and beyond, they aren't going to produce, at least so we would think, anything close to what they will do during this time of their career when they're right now either getting into or are already in their prime. So we already know that is just an astronomical and exorbitant amount of money, which on the back end is just going to be an eyesore. But they had to do it. They had to bring back their homegrown guy, because if they were to let him walk, the Blue Jay fan would have been up in arms and saying, wait, what are we doing here? We're just letting all these guys, whether leave, and not that they had a ton of guys leave, but whether they were trying to court Shohei or trying to court Juan Soto, or maybe even to a certain extent Aaron Judge when he was a free agent, where he was this close to signing to the Giants, as we know, a few off seasons back, they couldn't do it. And hopefully they signed Bichette too. Now, he's not going to get $500 million, and he's probably going to be somewhere in the 250 to 3, especially if he has a monster year this year. But I'm sure they're not going to negotiate that. They needed to get Vladdy in the fold, and they do. And so congratulations, that was a deal that they had to make. And I'm just happy that he's staying there, because we know about the balance of baseball. We know it's all about the big market teams. And at least Toronto has their guy, knowing that he's going to be there for the next 14 years and not in a big market elsewhere, whereas we all know the sport is eating itself alive. And that's for a story down the line when it comes to the CBA and the collective bargaining agreement, when after next year, it is going to be Armageddon for the sport. But other than that, let's see what else I could pull up here with baseball over the course of these last few days. I know I didn't talk about Jurickson Profar the other day, who got an 80-game suspension for PED use. And that is a significant loss. Not to say he was going to carry their lineup, but he's a guy who is obviously very resourceful, good hitter, outfielder, and now you're not going to see him until probably the early part of July. considering their start. Now, mind you, they split the 2 games against the Marlins over the weekend, so they did get off the schneid, the 0-7 start. They won on opening day, then they lost. I believe they got shut out on Saturday before they got rained out last night. So the Braves, 1-7, still trying to find their way here in the early part of their season. Now lose their left fielder for a few months. Bad job by Profar. Then you had Gunnar Henderson return back into the Oriole lineup to where he was 1 for 13 in Kansas City, where they lost 2 out of 3. So Henderson, extended spring training for him as he's trying to get himself back in game shape and his timing with his hitting. But certainly a lost weekend for him at the plate out in Kansas City. And then you have Blake Snell on the IL with shoulder inflammation. Good start for him, 1-0 with a 2 ERA, although did not pitch well in his last start where he walked the ballpark, typical Blake Snell. But with the Dodgers and with their resources and their riches, Snell out of the rotation for 15 days or beyond, you're not going to miss him. You got Yamamoto, you got Tyler Glasnow, you got Roki Sasaki. I mean, they have an embarrassment of riches. Where Snell, if he was the ace on any other team, knowing that he was going to be out for 2 weeks or beyond, you'd be shaking in your boots, so to speak. But because he's on the Dodgers and because they have pitching coming out of the wazoo, you could live without Snell for 2 weeks, 3, 4, or beyond. Because as we all know, as long as he's healthy, raring to go in October, that's when it's going to matter. That's when it's going to count. So for now, Snell, who's had his injury histories over the years, as we've known, but you don't have to worry about him if you're a Dodger, despite them losing 2 out of 3 in Philadelphia. And obviously, they're not going to go 162-0 and not even 161-1. All right, maybe 160-2. Haha, I know, I jest. But Dodgers lose their first series of the year as they move to Washington here over the course of the next 3 days. And other than that, in baseball, any other surprises? Anything else to really talk about? I know that the Giants have continued to play well. The San Francisco Giants, that is, of course, as I pull up the standings here real quick. Mets have won 4 in a row, including a sweep of the now aforementioned Toronto Blue Jays with Vladdy in tow. So they have done well and bounced back after that 2-4 start. You also have the Tigers who've rebounded. Remember, they were 0-3 to start their year, and now they won 5 of the last 7, including a sweep in their own right over the weekend. So the Tigers, and again against the White Sox, I understand, but now they have the Yankees coming in. So interesting test for the Tigers here in the early portion of the week as they have the Yankees who won 2 out of 3, and they just masked all weekend against the Pirates there in Pittsburgh. Although they lost yesterday in extras, but they did score 3 in the ninth. They were down 4-1 in the ninth inning. They scored 3 to tie, but they lost in extra innings in the 11th against the Buccos. So the Tigers have rebounded well. Rangers are off to a great start as Texas is now 8-2 in the West as they swept the Rays. And in the process, of course, beat the Cubs there 2 out of 3 in Cincinnati in the latter part of last week. So Texas off to a flying start. Giants, like I mentioned, 8-1 as they have now won 7 in a row, coming off of a couple of sweeps there, whether it was dating back last weekend over the Astros and then now the Mariners to boot there in San Francisco. So give it up for what the Giants have done as percentage points, but they've overtaken the division there in the NL West. So you have some good storylines here to start the year. Angels respectable 6-3, so all right. They've gotten off to good starts of 4 before they've hit the abutment. But teams that have struggled, Orioles 4-6, as we know, they're pitching not great. Rafael Devers had 4 hits yesterday in the win as they swept the Cardinals over the weekend. So the Cardinals, who started their year with a sweep, now come back to the pack, 4-5 in the NL Central. Brewers are at 500 after their dreadful start, getting swept in Yankee Stadium, as you know. Marlins trying to hold court there, 5-4 as they come play the Mets here over the next 3 days. And the weather is awful here in the Northeast as it's going to rain all day. They may get the game in tonight, but tomorrow the high, I believe, is supposed to be in the mid-40s. And I think game time tonight will probably be with the wind chill in the 30s. So it's just going to be abysmal out at Citi Field the next 3 days. But that's pretty much your baseball overall there as we get set for the early part of this week. And the schedule, as I mentioned, you have Yankees playing in Detroit, which is a very good series, which we'll keep an eye on here. Other series of note, Toronto playing in Boston. Dodgers from Philly to Washington, as I talked about. Minnesota at KC. Texas at Chicago to play in Wrigley. Baltimore now goes to the desert to play the Diamondbacks. Cincinnati at San Francisco. they played on opening day, if you recall, where the Giants won 2 out of 3. San Diego at the Athletics. Let me enunciate here. Other than that, that's it. Angels in Tampa. Philly at Atlanta. Division rivals there facing off against one another. Milwaukee, Colorado, and nothing to write home about. That's your baseball here over the course of the next 3 days. And then let me wrap up with the NFL. Some news and notes coming out of the National Football League. 2 retirements. Let me start there. Which you have had players who a lot have retired over the years, whether early after 1 year or a couple of years playing or however many years, but you've had some players go off into the sunset at early ages. And in this case, you had 2. One that you had a player that had been in the league for quite some time, and one, Teron Armstead, the offensive lineman, drafted by the Saints, played the bulk of his career with New Orleans, dating back to, I believe, 2013. Played the first 8-9 years there, and then the last 3 years he played in Miami for the Dolphins. So for him to go off into the sunset, had a very good career. I believe was a 2-time second-team All-NFL Pro player. So Armstead, who retires, all the best to him in the second stage of his career. But Julio Jones, who the back end of his career certainly gets forgotten here. Obviously, the first and the bulk of his career was with the Atlanta Falcons. Had 2 All-Pro years, first-team All-Pro, I might add. Also led the league in receiving yards for 2 years, I believe in 2013 and 15. Had that great catch that gets forgotten in the Super Bowl. There, tiptoeing the sidelines, where, of course, the Falcon fans to this day, they still stick to their stomach not winning that Super Bowl against New England 28-3. Whenever you say 28-3 in the ATL, they know what you're talking about. But for Jones, who may be a Hall of Famer one day, he did have 900 some odd catches, 13,000 yards, only 66 touchdowns. And I say only because when you think about receivers in the Hall of Fame that have had big time numbers, whether they've had over 100 touchdowns in their career or anything close to that, high 80s, 90s, but he was dominant. I understand only 2-time first-team All-Pro. I believe he had 2 second-team. I believe he'll get in. I don't think he's the first ballot Hall of Famer by any means, but he was a dominant receiver, 6'4", had speed, was like lightning. And for him to retire, obviously all the best to Julio Jones in the next stage of his life. Now, as far as extensions, you have a situation where Trey McBride of the Arizona Cardinals, I'm sure a lot of people who follow football know who he is, especially when it comes to fantasy. But when you think about top tight ends of the sport, maybe Trey McBride does not come to mind. Well, he is now the highest paid player at that position as he inked a $75 million extension. I believe it was 75. Let me just double check that when it comes to the tight end there. For whatever reason, now it's not coming up. Oh, here we go. Yeah, Trey Lance also signed a 1-year deal with the Chargers. And let's see if he's going to, he's going to be a caddy to Justin Herbert over the course of his career. But for the contract there, we're talking about Trey McBride. I don't know how many years it was. I want to say it was, here it is, 4 for 76. So when you average it out, it's going to be $19 million a year. So he gets the big payday, $43 million guaranteed. So congratulations to him. And then Geno Smith gets an extension as well. 2 years, I believe $75 million with the Raiders. As you all know, he got traded from Seattle to the Las Vegas Raiders there about a little over a month ago. And that is going to wrap it up. I know the draft's in a few weeks. Everybody's going to be geeked up for that, but not me right at this very second. And anything else that's happened in the world of sports over the last few minutes? Nope, that's pretty much it. As the Masters is Thursday, we'll talk more about that on Thursday's podcast as we'll tee off there the tradition unlike any other as the golf season officially with the biggest Super Bowl of golf, the biggest tournament in the golf season. And in essence, we'll kick off the golf year on Thursday. I'll talk about that among anything and everything that's happening in the world of sports. And that will conclude it. Thank you so much for passing by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the wonderful world of sports. If you haven't done so, people, please, I implore you to subscribe, rate, review. Throw me a few stars, write a review on Apple, Spotify, or whichever podcast platform you listen to. go to the YouTube channel at JAYREELZ where I post daily shorts. I'm going to have a vlog coming up tomorrow. I have a deadline. I'm going to post it out tomorrow. I'm hoping before noon. Hopefully there are no snags here throughout the editing process. But I went out to Citi Field on Friday to take the temperature of the Met fan as far as how they feel coming into this season, 6 games in, with all the expectations. Are they lofty? Yes. Are they going to match it or surpass it? Well, you have to find out, and you may be surprised by some of the answers. So I went out to Citi Field, did a little bit of some research to see whether or not the Met fan is either super optimistic, somewhere in the middle, or pessimistic. So that will come forth tomorrow. Subscribe to the channel. I just cracked 600 subscribers. I'm now at 601. Trying to get to 1,000 people. I understand I got to get to 7, 8, and 9 before I get to 1,000, but I want to get to that mark because once I get to that threshold, I can start monetizing with the amount of hours that have been watched, and I got to also monitor that. I know I surpassed it a couple of months ago, but let me get to 1,000 people. So please push it out there to the good, great, average sports fan in your life, the kook like yours truly, to your family, friends, foes, frenemies, and the like. Take a screenshot, send it to me on social media, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ podcast, or JAYREELZ for that matter. Twitter, JAYREELZ1, just the number. And if you want to hit me up with any questions, comments, suggestions, etc., you can do it the old-fashioned way at the JAYREELZ podcast at gmail.com or any of the social media accounts that I mentioned. And one more time, YouTube, the little engine that could. Remember, people, I'm doing this full time. This is my source of income. And there isn't a steady stream of it as of right now. So this is why I am reaching out to you guys and gals to please share with every one of your sports fan friends that are out there. And as long as I'm alive and breathing, the reason why I'm doing this full time is because I want to blaze a path and trail in this podcast space. Whether it's podcast twice a week, whether it's doing a live stream every Wednesday, 12 noon, whether it's critiquing videos, which is coming soon. That's right, I'm going to start critiquing videos that are out there from other walks of life and podcast luminaries, contemporaries, etc. Yes, I'm going to go there and fairly critique. No agendas, nothing. On top of lifestyle vlogs, sports vlogs, anything that you can imagine that is going to encompass not only the world of sports, but even the journey of yours truly. Because without you, there's no me. And I'm putting this out there for anyone and everyone to be consumed and galvanized, whatever adjective you want to put out there, because I was born to do this. As I like to say, it's in the blood, it's in the DNA. Content creating, talking sports, with nothing but passion, fire, fury, energy. And as long as I'm in front of this microphone and camera, I will continue to deliver my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx to South Beach to South Central to South Pacific and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ podcast, on the flip, baby.